Coronavirus infection rates are on the rise across the world, and the global COVID-19 death toll is now over 700,000. In Germany, thousands, including far-right groupings, have protested against anti-corona hygiene rules like masks and social distancing. They believe that their freedom is under threat from government regulations. Meanwhile, in Germany and elsewhere, fears of what will happen when holidaymakers return home and children return to school. So on to the point, we ask: coronavirus second wave, scaremongering or real danger? Well, thanks very much indeed for joining us here in the studio today. My three guests include Ulrike Fischer, former doctor, now journalist and author. She says we must make no compromises in implementing the lessons learned so far. If not, the second wave will be very, very painful, she says. Also with us is Ulrike Herrmann, business and finance journalist with the Berlin-based daily The Tageszeitung, or Die Taz. And Ulrike believes that by the fall, the latest, Corona will be back, and she warns the economy will be hard hit. And a very warm welcome to Tobias Kurth, Professor of Public Health and Epidemiology at Berlin's Charité Hospital. He says we must do everything in our power to keep infection rates low and protect the public sector. Thank you all for being here once again. I'd like to begin with you, Tobias Kurth. And until very recently, there was a sense here in Germany that we had the situation with the coronavirus pretty much under control, it's fair to say. So is it fair to ask what has gone wrong?
I'm not sure something went wrong. I think the slight rise that we're seeing right now was expected because we opened the borders, we allow people to travel abroad. People maybe behave somewhat different than they would do at home. They come back, some of them are infected. The schools are opening, public life is opening, which is a good thing, I think. The issue that we see over the last days is a certain rise in the numbers.
Numbers are up.
The numbers are up, yes, yeah. But we are on a very low level still. So there's an increase, and if this is a really big wave that we're seeing right now, we have to wait, and we have to everyone really take control on that infection rate, wearing masks, keeping their distance, so we can keep the public life open. That's really important.
Julia, you're nodding.
Yeah. I totally agree, because I also think that it's not surprising that the numbers are coming up. The Robert Koch Institute says parts of it is due to the to parties that are happening in private places with family and friends.
It's strange, isn't it, for viewers outside Germany or outside Berlin specifically? It will seem strange that we talk about Corona parties here in Berlin. Yeah.
Yeah, the ones I was talking about right now are not Corona parties, I would say, but it's people getting together and having little gatherings or bigger gatherings than were allowed a few weeks ago. And I mean, I think it's normal that the numbers are going to rise after having more parties or get-togethers, more gatherings like that, but that we can still react to it and that we still have it under control. We're not being hit by a wave yet. It might develop to a wave, but we're not there yet.
Angela Merkel always warns against she uses the German word, of course, she uses the word Leichtsinnigkeit, which means sort of complacency. It appears to me and to many other observers to be dreadful complacency. Your response gives me the notion that it's sort of all part of human nature.
It is part of human nature. We've been in a time that was hard on us. It's a burden for everybody having to live in this situation, not knowing when it's going to end, living a life that's not like the life we used to, and that causes stress, and that makes it hard for us to keep to the rules. But still, of course, we have to stick to the rules, and we have to keep going. But it is part of human nature that we have that we want to end this, and that we get, especially if we don't see the numbers rising. And in summer, we had a really calm time, and that's what we the prevention paradox. That's if you don't see the numbers rising and the virus being really, really dangerous, you might believe it's already over. And of course, that's not the case. It's natural to think this, but we have, of course, to tell the people it's not over yet. We really have to keep taking the measures.
Okay, Ulrike Herrmann, the authorities in Germany have been broadly praised for the response to the crisis so far. Do you share in that praise?
Well, I think that the German authorities reacted in the right way, but it's not true, and that's something that the Germans tend to think, that it was only Germany that was successful in fighting the pandemic. For example, a country that is always overlooked and that was even more successful than Germany is Greece, because Greece stopped Carnival, for example, at the very beginning, whereas in Germany we had big parties at Carnival, with the ending with lots of corona cases. So the Greeks didn't have Carnival. They stopped parties. They stopped, or they shut all the restaurants down, all the shops down, at a stage when the Germans were still trying to act as if everything was normal. So, well, yes, the Germans were good, but they were not the only ones successful in Europe.
And Tobias Kurth, you are clearly worried from your statement at the top of the show that the health services in Germany could, in the foreseeable future, be overstretched, despite everything that we've just been hearing.
I was not talking only about the health services, but about public life as a whole. So restaurants and the economy, like concert halls, like cinemas, that we can keep this open. So we just managed to open them up again, and the numbers were low, and so we really have to make efforts to keep them open, and we all can change the numbers by wearing masks, by keeping the distance, and eventually, hopefully, we have medication or vaccination available that really make a big difference. But until then, we have to work together to prevent a further lockdown.
OK, despite all that we've heard so far, some observers are talking about a corona divide here in Germany. And one half of that divide is the growing number of people joining protests against hygiene regulations and claiming that fundamental freedoms are at stake.
The estimated crowd of 20,000 people who demonstrated against compulsory masks and other coronavirus restrictions last weekend was an unusual mix. Among them were coronavirus deniers, anti-vaxxers, right-wing extremists, and conspiracy theorists, all united in their anger against the federal government. Their motto: the end of the pandemic, a day of freedom. They're just plain scare tactics. I don't see any danger. I don't know any sick people. Our demand is basically going back to democracy, away with these laws that have been imposed on us, away with the masks that make us slaves. People who don't do research the way we do it, they are kept stupid and believe what the government tells us, and they buy into the fear that the government peddles to us, and fear attacks the immune system. Freedom or safety? Is this the choice that defines the pandemic?
Julia Fischer, that's the big question, isn't it? I mean, we've all been following the debate here in Berlin, here in Germany, that was triggered by that demonstration last weekend. Is it public health against freedom? Is that the divide, the debate?
I don't think so, or it's difficult to say. I mean, and I think great parts of Germany and the people in Germany understand that these measures are needed, and that it's okay, and that it's not really our freedom being taken away from us. It's just a piece of cloth that we have to wear in the face. But then there's also other people who can't take the situation, who are being more stressed by it maybe, and who are trying to find an answer why this situation is so difficult to stand, and that's why they're making up other explanations. Because, yeah.
A lot of people clearly do believe that democracy is in danger, and there are then the others you've been explaining who you know, see the other side of the argument. One politician here in Germany talked of the people taking part in these protests as co-vidiots, corona idiots. Yeah, that was pretty extreme stuff. Surely we need to have more sympathy or more understanding for people and their concerns.
I think you have to differentiate between the people. You have to see the ones that are claiming difficulties with the situation that are perfectly righteous. That people want to see their friends, meet friends. People want to work. People want not having their financial. They don't want to be destroyed financially, and these things are problems that we need to hear, and we need to talk to the people and explain to them what is important. But then, of course, there's the ones that it's difficult to talk to because they have complaints that are just not right. And those are the ones.
Corona is a false alarm. What do you say to that?
It's not a false alarm. Corona is real, Corona is dangerous, and you can measure Corona, clearly. And if you say Corona doesn't exist, then we're in a very dangerous situation. The protest, the mix of different groups are very difficult to understand, and actually there's a danger. And when you have right-wing groups that have a certain agenda and trying to use this momentum, and there are people, as Ulrike Fischer just said, who have real concerns about the situation, who see that really we have low numbers, so obviously not much is going on. It's summer's beautiful outside, and not much is happening, so why can't I? So that's a normal reaction, and in a democracy we should be able to discuss this, and we should allow these voices to speak up, and we should openly discuss their concerns, to understand their concerns, and jointly really target the pandemic, because we can only do it jointly. If one group thinks that way works and the other are just idiots, that is really then dividing the population, and we should not do that.
But it was interesting to know that there were practically no masks in sight at the Berlin demonstration. It feels like a form of sort of Russian roulette.
I wouldn't be that extreme. You certainly risk getting infected. Whether then you are actually getting sick is another question. And obviously you're risking that you infect other people and then they infect other people and so on. So I think it was not a smart move to not wear a mask during a demonstration where you were very close together. But obviously that was one of the reasoning to not wear a mask. I think we all have to understand that each of us can make a difference. And if we wear this piece of cloth for a couple more months and maybe then select it, so in airplanes, for example, or public transportation. Asia has this since many, many years that people wear masks in public transportation. That's a normal situation there. Yeah. Maybe that's a new normal for us. And if you wear this for a couple of minutes or a couple of hours, I don't think that your freedom is in danger.
But Ulrike Herrmann, what do you do with people who do refuse to wear masks? Mainly men.
Yes, that's exactly the case. I mean, that's something that we also note in our newspaper, that we get letters by men who always complain that they have to wear masks or that they are not allowed to celebrate their 17th birthday or whatever. So, yes, I think that you should just find them. I think that it is important to talk to people, but I think it's also important to show that the state has authority. Because those who always complain about their freedom, if you look at their personality, usually it's people who somehow crave authority. And they react positively to authority. They just want to see where the line is. I mean, it's exactly those people, not all of them, but many, who vote for right-wing parties. So they want to have, as we say in German, a Führer, an authoritarian person. So I think, in a way, it's good if the state or the government just shows how the rules are.
Ulrike Fischer, what would your response be to people who simply refuse to wear masks? I came in to do the show today and I was sitting opposite a guy who wasn't wearing a mask at all, or it was halfway down his chest. Well, what do you do? Do you address people? Do you pull people up?
That's difficult. I would always... I think I would decide in the moment if I think the one is open for debating and talking, or like in the subway, for example, maybe I would just let him pass. But I would always try, as a science journalist, to address the people and to really explain why masks are important, that they are the one important measure that we have.
But do you think it's okay to fine them, that they have to pay 150 euros? I think that's fair.
I think it's fair. In the subway and in supermarkets, when you know you can't keep the distance, I think it's okay to do so, in order to make the people know that their actions have effect.
It's interesting. I was talking to a friend of mine from Thailand who was saying that in large parts of Asia, what we were just saying, that it's a real affront to other people's well-being. He actually used quite a coarse term. He said it's like urinating in the corner. It's that extreme. But we sort of, for some reason, more or less accepted.
It's a difference of mentality somehow, and a difference of being used to things that are polite and that are normal to do in a society. In Asia, it's way more, it's polite and it's normal to do so. And we still need to get used to it. I think we can, but it still needs some time.
Just about these protests, before we move on to a different matter, how typical are they? Is there something specifically German about the protests?
I wouldn't think so. The last pandemics we had over the last century, you always have these voices, and you always have a protest more or less obvious, and you always have people who have their theories about the virus, about the pandemic, and about the reaction, how the government react, and so on. So in Germany, we are used to go out and state our opinion, and that's a good thing. And so to having this particular demonstration is also, I wouldn't say normal, but was expected, and I'm sure will happen again. And so I think it's important to keep up the discussion while, obviously, we also need to make sure that the minimal measures that we have to take, wearing masks, I don't think it's about the mask. I think it's about a system trying to tell you what you have to do. And wearing a mask is more or less easy. Sometimes getting uncomfortable after hours, if you wear glasses, a little bit difficult, but I don't think it's about the mask.
But in a way, you know, it was just 20,000 people, and here in Berlin we have 4 million inhabitants. So in a way, it was a very small minority.
And they came from all parts of Germany. So the words and all people who live in Berlin, but they all gathered.
OK, we will continue to monitor the situation. Now, around the world, lockdowns have certainly had a devastating economic impact. Many countries are still struggling to recover, including in southern Europe, particularly Spain.
It is a clearance sale, and although Inigo Crespo has already drastically reduced his prices, few customers come to buy anything or are even able to buy anything. Yesterday, I made 102 euros at most. Honestly, I don't know how long we can survive with these prices. Crespo has already had to close one of his 3 stores. The Spanish economy suffered an 18.5% slump in the second quarter, while the average across Europe was a solid 12%. A historic drop. Now, shopkeepers like Inigo Crespo fear a renewed increase in the number of infections because another lockdown would be his ruin. Can Europe's economies survive a second coronavirus wave?
It's a big question. We're asking a lot of you, Ulrike, but that is the question. Can economies like Spain survive a second wave?
Well, Spain can only survive if it's being helped by the other European countries. Because, you know, unfortunately, in Europe, we have this divide between poor countries like, let's say, Spain or Portugal or Greece, and rich countries like Germany. For example, for Germany, it was no problem to survive Corona so far, because what the government did was just to print new money by taking out loans. And there's no limit for the German government when it comes to taking out loans. But for those poor countries, it's really difficult to get finance. So what we need is that whole of Europe agrees on a package that has already been proposed, and it's around 750 billion euros that are supposed to be voted for in Parliament and then to go to the poor countries. And it's really very important that this package of 750 billion euros is agreed on and decided on, and then perhaps the situation in Spain can be alleviated.
What about the role of people like us, ordinary citizens in Germany and in the rest of Europe? What should we be doing? I mean,
consume. You should go out and buy as much as you can. I mean, it's, you know, from a vantage point of environment, it's of course horrible, but that we have to consume. But in order to save the economy, it's the best thing to do.
People need to go out and shop and not stay at home and not stay at home and worry. Yeah.
Well, that's basically it. Yeah.
Yeah, but that asks big questions about the future of our economy, because people are, you know, the economies are slowing down. That's the essential message here. Yeah.
Yes, of course, and it will take a long time for the economy to recover. Germany, for example, just had a decline of 10% in the second quarter. It was not as bad as Spain, that had 18%, but nonetheless 10% is a lot. And it will take whole of 2021 in order to somehow to get back on track.
And what about the global economy, meanwhile? I mean, that's, it's all interconnected, it's all so fragile.
Yeah, it's all slowing down. And especially, it's hardly possible to somehow see what will be happening in the United States because they do not get the pandemic under control. So probably they will have a second lockdown. And that, of course, is very bad news for the whole of the world because the United States is one of the most important customers, for example, for the German economy. So it's really very difficult to see what will happen.
Tobias, I made a little list of the countries that are struggling the most at present. I mean, so many countries are struggling. USA, Japan, Morocco, Hong Kong, Australia. I could go on, obviously. What public health measures does the global community have moving into the future now? What new measures? What new proposals?
It's very difficult to answer this on the global scale. So each region has their specific settings, a specific healthcare system, a specific economy, specific social, psychological systems. So it's really difficult to say what we all can do. Certainly what we have to try to do is get the numbers under control. And so important also for Germany to keep on going and to not advise, but really tell other countries how it may work. And the WHO obviously has experts who can assist, but often people don't listen. And the initially, a pandemic was not taken seriously. So I say, well, it's just a little flu virus, and so let him come. And obviously now they suffer the most, these countries. Other countries, they have a different setup in terms of having no resources to actually do something. So it's very difficult for them to actually react and do
They simply
things.
can't afford it.
They cannot afford it. And people living conditions, working conditions, living conditions at home are very difficult and challenging and increase the likelihood of getting infected. So there's a certain social gradient where you have. So those on the lower end are more likely to getting infected, and those countries who have less resources are more likely to having big issues. And then you have countries like the United States and others who have enormous resources, but they just didn't want to react. So it's a mix of both, and we have to understand that the globe is important also for the economy. Like if in Germany all is well, we export a lot. If the others don't buy, then we also have a problem. So we need to help other countries in Europe and elsewhere to really get the numbers of infection under control.
Just one quick word from you that in the last couple of days there's been a new tool that has been talked about as a contact diary for possibly moving forward into the winter months. Just give us an idea of what that's all about. That sounds quite interesting.
Yeah, you pretty much write down with whom you are in contact. It's pretty much the idea of an app. I'm not so convinced. Also, the app is a great idea, but it only works with a smartphone, and it only works on the smartphones of the newest generation. So those who are at high risk of getting infected, those who cannot afford it, cannot use it. So we have to find ways, and maybe the diary works, but I can't really see how it really helps to control the situation. It will help specifically if you say, did you write down with whom you had a contact? So you help the public health officials to really trace other people. But it will remain difficult.
Ulrike Fischer, how do we learn to live with the crisis that is ongoing? It's been with us for 6 months now, as you mentioned earlier, but it's not going away. How do we learn to live with it?
We have to learn to live with it. We have to get used to it. We have to accept that it's a stressful situation and that it's going to be hard for everyone, but that if we all work together, we can keep the injuries small. We can try to identify the clusters and to isolate clusters so that we, meaning groups of people that get infected and that are at risk for spreading the disease. So we have to really go to those clusters and isolate those, and that way we could keep the measures low for the rest of the public, and that is an aim I think that we should all work for, looking forward to using what we've learned to make the life that's ahead more normal, the more normal we can.
There is something out there, however, called response fatigue. How worrying is that?
That is worrying. I mean, it's also part of human nature. because we're stressed and we can't take that for a long time. It is difficult, but all we can do is keep telling the people that we have to work together and that we have to watch out for one another, that it's not only you, it's not myself that I have to be worried about, but all the other people. I think we can only keep talking, keep explaining, also not judging on the people, but talking to them and explaining.
Mm-hmm. Ulrike Herrmann, one final word. Give me a very quick take on what you expect. Are we going to get a second wave?
Yes, I'm sure we'll be getting a second wave in autumn, but perhaps it will be possible to just control it by identifying those clusters. And apart from that, we just have to wait for a vaccination.
That's the big point, isn't it? Thanks very much for joining us here on To The Point today. I hope we've given you plenty of food for thought. If we have, come back next week. Until then, bye-bye and tschüss.